Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Primetime Pards, our second edition of what has going to become, or what has become, a monthly edition where we welcome in some former Lafayette graduates who have certainly reached the epitome of their careers. And I don't think anybody represents the name Primetime more than our guest tonight, Beth Mowins, class of '89. Before we get to Beth, I would like to remind you that for optimal viewing of tonight's show, change to speaker view right now. That's strongly recommended. And then when whoever is speaking, you'll get to see them full screen. That's in the upper left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. To ensure the best possible experience for everyone, your microphones are muted. It might be a better experience if mine was, but yours is. So we will allow you to come in during the Q&A portion of the show. All you have to do is utilize the raise your hand feature, which can be found by opening participants. Before we get started with Beth tonight, I'd like to introduce once again the Director of Athletics at Lafayette College. So here is Sharita Freeman.
Thanks, Gary, and we definitely enjoy having you. So no muting of Gary's microphone this evening. But I'd like to welcome you all to the second installment of Primetime Pards. And ordinarily, this week would be one of a crazy time for us on College Hill with our fall athletic teams beginning to report. So it feels kind of sad on campus, but over the last few days, I've started to see students starting to pop in and some activities starting to build up on College Hill. So even without fall sports, I still think that there's much excitement to be had with the start of the fall semester. And we have our coaches who have been engaging with our student athletes and have been keeping them connected to the campus and connected within an athletic standpoint, which has been wonderful. And lucky for us, we will be able to welcome back a small percentage of student athletes along with the other students who will be here during the fall semester. So we will have a group here that we'll be able to see and engage with, which will be nice. We certainly look forward to a time where we will be able to welcome them all back and be back to normal with our sports as we normally do, but we still have some time to do that. I'm excited to have members of our women's basketball team and staff. I'm excited to see you all on, and I think this will be a very engaging evening for everyone. But very excited to have you with us here, Beth. Very exciting to have the opportunity to hear a little bit more about your story as a woman, as a female athletic director. I must say that I'm always looking for examples of pioneers and people to emulate and people to inspire me. And you have definitely done that over the years. And I am really excited to have you be a member of our Lafayette family and to be able to have this opportunity to listen to you today and get to know you a little bit more. So thank you so much for joining us. And Gary, take it away so we can hear from Beth.
All right, Sharita, thank you very much. Let's talk a bit about Beth Mowins, class of '89. She is a pioneering and veteran play-by-play broadcaster and sports journalist, and as many of you know, currently working for ABC and ESPN. In 2017, Beth was the first woman in 30 years to call an NFL game and the first to call a nationally televised game when she worked the LA Chargers against the Denver Broncos as part of ESPN's season opening Monday Night Football doubleheader. She began calling college football for ESPN in 2005. Since joining ESPN in 1994, she has called NCAA championships in basketball, softball, soccer, and volleyball, and has been the voice of the Women's College World Series for more than 20 years. So Beth, welcome. Thanks for being with us. And normally, Beth, when I have someone on for an interview, I thank them for taking time out of their busy schedule to be with us. But in this day and age, I'm not quite sure you're very busy. So tell us how busy you are right now.
No, unfortunately, I like most of you, my world revolves around the sports calendar and in particular the college sports calendar. So for me, this would usually be, my big time off in June and July. And I would probably actually be packing right now to get ready to go to Raiders training camp. and get ready to call the Raiders preseason games. That was always a lovely trip, Gary, up to Napa, where they used to hold their camp. So I usually am just winding down a busy summer of doing not a whole lot, but really ramping up and getting very excited for college football and for the NFL season coming up. And then that kind of carries me through. So, I've had to come up with some different things. My husband decided that now would be a good time to sell his old house. So that's how I've been spending the last 2 weeks, rummaging through the old house and getting that ready for sale. And I've found a lot more time to read some books, including a couple from Don Miller. I just finished his book on the air war in WW2, and Vicksburg is now queued up next on the list. And so I've kind of been finding other things to do around, and unfortunately, I have not yet landed on that moment where it's time to write the great American novel. I can't seem to get pen down to paper just yet. So I'm actually kind of hoping sports will come back before I have to do that.
I truly understand it, because I'd much rather be in Napa myself, I think, than going through an old house.
And there's only so much you can binge watch. I mean, I've been through all the Narcos. I've been through Schitt's Creek, Succession, Billions. So I think the morning show is next in my queue if we have to continue with that.
It's amazing how our lives have changed, and not for the better. Well, all right. Well, let's talk about your life a little bit. You grew up in Syracuse, New York, North Syracuse High School. You were the complete athlete. You played basketball, you played softball, you played soccer. And from what I know about you, it was a very competitive home environment, right? Dad, a coach, 3 brothers. So you probably grew up just playing men's sports.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was basically Dad was a high school basketball coach, and with 3 brothers and all the other little kids, boys and girls in the neighborhood, all loved playing sports. So that was really my existence right from the very start. And I also knew, Gary, that I wanted to be a sportscaster. So while we were playing wiffle ball and kickball and, Ghost in the Graveyard, I even had vocabulary to call Ghost in the Graveyard play-by-play, Gary. That was one of the big challenges back then, riding around in my big wheel and my Mr. Microphone. And so sports has always been a part of my life, and I was real fortunate, being around my dad and being around coaches and players, and literally growing up in the gym, I think was a huge advantage. And so that ultimately led to being good enough at basketball to play in college, and being fortunate enough that Pat Fisher spotted me at a summer camp, and I was able to join the Lafayette family. I'm
a little surprised. So that early you knew that sports broadcasting is what you wanted to do.
Yeah, saw Phyllis George on the NFL Today show with Brent Musburger, Irv Cross, and Jimmy the Greek.
Yes.
And rushing home from church on Sundays and sitting in front of the TV for the old NFL Today show. And there was Phyllis. And at that point in the mid to late 70s, she was interviewing all the Dallas Cowboys. And I thought, Roger Staubach, if you can get a sit-down interview with Roger, that's one of the coolest things ever. And so that's when I got bitten by that bug and knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Well, that's an amazing story, because very often, we all have these kind of dreams as young people, but the dreams kind of fade away. It obviously never faded away for you. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting too. I'm sure, and you mentioned already that you've read some history books here in this lull. You've always been someone passionate about history, right?
Yeah, that was actually my minor at Lafayette, along with, Rocks for Jocks and art history, because those were good memorization classes that all the athletes were good at. But yeah, I've always been fascinated by history and American history in particular. My dad not only was a high school coach, but he was a high school history teacher. Mm-hmm. So, once again, that was always around our house, whether it was the old encyclopedias or even at Lafayette, having to dive into the old Dewey Decimal System over at Skillman Library. I've always kind of been interested in history, how people handle adversity, how people adapt in their daily lives when a crisis pops up, something similar to what we're going through today. And also sort of the biographies of successful people and what makes them tick, what makes them turn ambition and aggression into making all the right moves, doing the smart things, making the right choices. And so that's something that I was always geared towards, as well as one of the other reasons I chose Lafayette was because I was encouraged to be an English major, not necessarily specialize in journalism, because you can do all the broadcast journalism stuff at night and on the weekends, and you want to be able to be really adept at writing and communicating, and those skills serve you well no matter what you do, because even for sportscasters, it's still a people business, it's still a communication business, and how you interact and network are critical.
It sounds too like obviously you don't get into Lafayette without the academics, and it sounds like your parents were very instrumental in pointing you in the right direction.
Well, I like to say my parents raised a point guard, and so that is sort of what I became, and that was a good thing, because I was in college with Mo McManus and Stacy Caginello, who at the time were the top 2 scorers in Lafayette history, and they made it very clear to me as a rookie grabbing the starting job that I was to assist them as much as humanly possible. And so that kind of served me well, getting into sportscasting. Quite often you're the only girl in the room. I've always been comfortable in that environment, and sort of that point guard mentality of no matter what your team is, trying to make people around you better, accepting that responsibility for having the ball in your hands and making big decisions, and holding yourself accountable for figuring out what qualities amongst everybody else around you benefit the team the most, and those things that get a team to a level that no individual could ever get to. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, as I've taken a trip down memory lane a little bit today, is playing for Pat Fisher at Lafayette, as well as for my dad when I was younger. Pat's 2 years in 1985 and 1987, one of those I was a part of, are the best records in Lafayette college basketball history, men or women. And my senior class and the one right before us with Nancy Lembo are the 2 winningest classes in terms of win percentage in men's and women's Lafayette basketball history. So I'm really proud of that as a point guard. And also, Gary, I really got lucky in terms of timing, because I arrived on campus with the likes of Frank Bauer and the football team, Otis Ellis on the men's basketball team, Jeff Mudis was my year on the baseball team, and Jen Smith, one of the best athletes in Lafayette college history, was on the lacrosse team in those days. And that sort of winning bred this whole, okay, we got to keep up with the Joneses. The men's soccer team is out there every fall winning the East Coast Conference and talking a lot of trash to us, and we have to follow suit. And it was a real lively time at Lafayette, where we were trying our best to keep up with the Joneses and keep up with all of the other teams who, fortunate for us at that time, were all highly successful. And not only were we competitive with Lehigh, but we were competitive with each other on campus, which was great.
Well, let's get you officially to Lafayette, because there's a very interesting story that I'm sure almost no one knows. You had committed to Lafayette. Pat Fisher obviously had convinced you to come to Lafayette to play some basketball. But before that, a guy named Gino Auriemma offered you a scholarship at the University of Connecticut in his first year, right, of coaching?
Woulda, coulda, shoulda, what if, right? I don't regret it for a moment. Well, actually, one moment my senior year when they kicked our ass pretty good when we played them in an early season tournament. But we played in the state semifinals and lost, and so we went down to watch the championship game. And then when I got home, there was a message that Gino Auriemma called. He was a late hire at UConn, and of course,
did you know anything about him?
No, because they were terrible at the time. Their facilities were terrible. I grew up in Syracuse, so I grew up around the Big East. Syracuse fans cannot like Connecticut fans as a youngster growing up. So I was very happy with my prospects at Lafayette. I knew I could play right away and compete for a starting job, and that was important to me. And I had a great visit when I came to Lafayette and really liked Coach Fisher a lot. and it was a smaller school, actually smaller enrollment than my high school was. So that was really a good spot for me to be. And then, of course, 4 years later, Gino already had it going at UConn, and we played them somewhere in a November tournament. I think it was in Richmond, and they were up 20 at halftime and just rolled us. And I thought, okay, maybe that guy's got a little something going.
Yeah, actually, before he got there, they had never had a winning season.
No.
So
he really turned it around quickly.
Turned it all around, but not unlike the way you and your classmates turned Lafayette basketball around.
And in fact, that's Brianna Stewart back there on my wall, who's from my high school. She's from my hometown. So I do like UConn a little bit now.
Yeah, I can understand. It's hard to dislike all their success. So your Lafayette years, you graduated in '89. You already mentioned an English major, a history minor. 4 20-win seasons. You have to be so proud of the fact you guys put together an 85-31 record. You won 73% of your games. That's the best 4-year sequence in all of Lafayette women's basketball. 3 championship appearances, and then you won the championship in '87. That had to be a special moment. Yeah,
that was really good. I had a really just great group of people around us, and Coach Fisher and Dave Pipperato was our assistant coach back in those days, and it just sort of all came together for us my sophomore year. And ironically enough, we're playing Lehigh in the championship down on Long Island, and I always kid my dear friend Mo McManus, the all-time leading scorer at Lafayette for years and years. She actually, I threw it down to her inside, and for the first time in her career, maybe her one and only assist, Gary, she actually was triple teamed and passed it back out to me. To hit the game winner, and we beat Lehigh by 2, and that also happened to coincide shortly thereafter. Lehigh's coach, Muffet McGraw, had enough of the Leopards, Gary, and she decided she had to move on and try and find success somewhere else. So I like to tease Muffet that we chased her out of the conference, and she had to go running off to Notre Dame to win the league and win a national championship. But yeah, we lost to Lehigh once my freshman year, and then we never lost to them again. 9-1 against the Engineers back in those days. That's one of the things that our team is still to this day most proud of. That's an amazing number. Another amazing number. You played in 117 games, but you started 115 games. Yeah. What were the 2 you didn't start, when you first came on campus, or senior night, or one of those things? Well, Coach was pretty ornery back in those days, and to hand the keys to the Lamborghini off to some hotshot rookie out of Central New York wasn't in the cards. And then I'm pretty sure Stacy and Mo staged a coup and said, "Look, we need somebody out there that's a true point guard that can run the show for us." And so that next game is when I took over that starting job. And then, one of the toughest things that I've ever had to deal with, and again, Lafayette College was there really to rescue me, Gary. I lost my older brother, Mike, at the end of January, my senior year. And so I missed the next game. And the first game back, ironically enough, was again against Lehigh. And we came back to beat them at Kirby. And that was the only other game that I missed. And honestly, I think my dad, what did you say, 117? I bet my dad made probably 110 of those games over the years. Goodness. And my mom was there every weekend to watch us play. They logged a lot of miles on the old station wagon following us around. We had a great group of parents with us. Wow, that's just wonderful. I look at your numbers. You are in the top 8 in 10 statistical categories in women's basketball. But the one that amazes me, and I don't know, is Mo McManus and Stacey Cajanella that frightening that you came up with 715 assists? At that point, they were, yes. I mean, that's an amazing. There's no one within 300 of that number. Wow. Yeah, that is, you come across people, I think, that will be completely honest with you. Back in those days, I loved watching Mo Cheeks with the Philly 76ers. And, that you love a great pass more than you love a great basket. And that was something that I enjoyed so much. And, so lucky for me at Lafayette, we had Stacey Cajanello at the 2, Mo McManus was inside, Mary Procapis was down at the 5, and we had Nancy Lembo, the sharpshooter, coming in off the bench. So I had weapons all around me to distribute, and they were kind enough to knock down those shots when I passed it off. And so, that's something I've always enjoyed so much, is a great assist.
I do the women's basketball team now, and I think Coach Damon is watching tonight along with the basketball team, as Sharita mentioned. But I see so many Lafayette former women's basketball players come back, and Pat Fisher always has her seat there at Kirby, and they always come and spend time with Pat. What was so special about her as a coach?
I think Pat did a great job of, first of all, making sure that we were the best in execution, and we were the smartest team on the floor, because she was also the first one to tell us, Gary, that we were not the most talented team on the court. So we better figure out another way to do it. But there was a great camaraderie in the talent that she recruited. We really watched out for one another, and that starts at the top. Whether you're on the court, whether you're off the court, we had each other's backs around campus and things like that, and the alumni were great with that. But it was just repetition after repetition after repetition. We used to run the color play, and it was literally just, as I'm coming up the floor, yell out a color, and that's the play we ran. And every opponent that we played knew it didn't matter if I said yellow or red or pink. They all just turned and looked at each other and said, "Here comes the back screen over there. Don't get caught." And literally every time we called color and they knew exactly what was coming, we would just smile and laugh, because they could not stop it for 4 years straight. When you set that screen right and you run that defender off that screen right with no air here, they could not stop it. If the pass was on the money, bang. And so it was just things like that really Pat did such a great job with, making sure that we were all on the same page and doing the things that we need to do to win.
I'm sure she's got a big smile on her face right now. We hope that she's watching us on the computer. 1,000-point scorer, number 2 in steals, number 1 in assists, number 2 in free throws made, number 3 in 3 percentage. Just amazing numbers coming out of your 4 years at Lafayette. You become a member of the Maroon Club Hall of Fame, top female athlete in 1989. How about some of the memories that don't have much to do with basketball? I know you were part of the Easton Phillipsburg High School football game.
Yeah, that when so I obviously I knew that I wanted to get into sportscasting, and if you were with us with Tom Ojakian for the last
who's also watching,
Pards, Tom was instrumental in bringing that to campus, and I was able to basically be down on the sidelines. I was a runner for the sideline reporter and pulling cables, getting her a cup of coffee, changing the batteries on her microphone, whatever was needed, jotting down notes for if that was necessary. And so that was sort of my first glimpse, like behind the scenes, behind the curtain of big time broadcasting. And so I'm always thankful to OJ for that, and remember those things, tremendously. My friends and my teammates all knew that I wanted to get into sportscasting. So quite often, back in those days, you had the big shoulder camera and the microphone. And so sometimes after men's games, we would stay out on the court and we would rehearse a stand up, and I would record as if I was the sideline reporter for the game, doing post-game reports. Quite often they couldn't keep a straight face, and I'd have to yell at them to get it together so I could get something on tape. And those are kinds of the things that stand out, those types of experiences, just being a part of Lafayette athletics. We used to sell programs at the men's football games. We'd be hawking programs up and down the stairs, and so you'd get to mix and mingle with a lot of alumni, and you'd get to, see the whole football operation as it was run from behind the scenes and things like that. So it was just great to get such a broad base. People talk about that liberal arts education, and it's true. It's so true. And something that I still say to this day with young people that want to get into the business is know a little bit about a lot, and never say no for no particular reason. If you have an opportunity to do something or learn from somebody else in the business, you got to do it, because that person may end up hiring you one day. That person may end up recommending you for a job one day. You may be working with that person in the booth sitting next to you one day. So all those things were lessons learned at Lafayette that I was able to take with me and learn from those and develop even more as a sportscaster.
And when we chatted a little bit before, I don't think anybody who was on campus forgets the men's basketball team beating Notre Dame. So you were also a great fan. John Leone tells me the story every time I see him. It is just a huge moment in Lafayette basketball, and you were strictly there as a fan.
Yeah, we were all there as a fan. We stormed the court afterwards. You know, the men's team lived off of that for years and years and years after. And it was just one of those, you know, you hear, and I deal a lot now with Power Five and all the big boys. And people talk about whether or not, you know, the smaller schools should have opportunities. And I always think of that Notre Dame game and how important that was, how significant it was to be able to challenge yourself against some of the best in the business. And what a big deal that was, you know, because we would start that actually, I think was January 4th, if I remember. So we were just returning to campus and everybody moving into South College for the interim. And so we were spending all our time together with all the winter sports athletes. And of course, the men's basketball team ruled the roost. The whole rest of that month, we had to deal with Coach Leone every day in practice and with Butch. You know, they wanted a little extra time on the practice court after that. I'll tell you that.
I understand completely. One other thing, I know you were a resident advisor, so I reached out to Jim Kravosky.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Jim?
Oh, I've got great stories on Jim.
Well, he told me that he'd be very happy to share your student disciplinary record tonight.
Oh, boy.
If you're interested in getting that out in the open.
I was clean, Gary. I have a couple of teammates who may have had a run-in or two.
So you used to look the other way, I assume.
He is back in those days, and I don't know if it's changed much, but back in those days, we really didn't have to deal with much discipline. We were more like social chairman. We were guidance counselors and things like that. But I had a pretty tough stretch. So my freshman year, my brother passed. And one of the things that happened when I wasn't even sure if I was coming back to Lafayette. But I went through a lot of stuff that summer. And one of those was getting cut. This is my Michael Jordan story. A travel ball team in the summer that I always play for, I got cut because I was so out of shape and so disinterested. And that was kind of my wake-up call. Okay, I got to go back to Lafayette and I got to do things different. I got to make some changes. So I'm going to rush. So I rushed to sorority. I'm like, yes, all right, let's get my social calendar kicking. And of course, I return to Rush and they give me the Heisman. Nobody wants me. So now I've lost my brother. Nobody wants me socially. And basketball, again, saves my life. You know, I dove into hoops with everything I had, and that ended up being our championship team. And then this angel from above, Jim Kravosky, reaches out to me. He was a big sports fan, and I knew Jim a lot from my freshman year. He says, you know, you ought to try to be a resident advisor. I think you've got the skill set to do that. And quite frankly, it looks like you could use a win. So I went through what back in those days was a rigorous process. You had to write a paper. You had to go through interviews with other students. You had to go through an interview with Dean Kravosky, and I did get a win. And so January of that year, I was a different person. And things started to turn much more positive, and we ended up winning the championship. And I was able to help, recruit a few other players that were instrumental in our success the next couple of years. That always happened, you know, primarily in the spring semester. And so, I give Jim so much credit for really helping things start going my way at Lafayette and valuable lessons learned about the people that you interact with and the friendship and the fellowship and the fortitude that you develop through adversity and all those people around you that can give you a big boost, whether that's a pat on the back or a kick in the ass, whatever you might need at that particular juncture.
Well, Jim is watching, and I'm sure he's so happy to hear those kind words that you expressed. Yep. All right, it's on to become a broadcaster, so you've got to go to the Mecca of broadcast journalism. That's Syracuse University. I assume that's why you chose it.
I wish that there was something much more complex involved, but it was actually, as most seniors go through, do I get a job? Do I go to grad school? And I got the letter about grad school before I got a job. So that was it. And it ended up being very fortuitous for me because I had a chance to go home. And I already knew people in the Syracuse market. I was already very familiar with the Newhouse School of Communications, which is the best in the world for broadcast journalism, and in particular for play-by-play announcers, the likes of Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, Sean McDonough, Marv Albert. So that was where all the best were, and that ended up being the great next step for me. They had a 2-year master's program that you could go in 1 year. So I started literally right after graduation. I drove home and started class, and I was done by the next year. And I was able to start working and getting paid in the Syracuse market and getting on television, not just behind the scenes anymore, but in front of the camera. And within a couple of years after that, Syracuse was in the Big East then. So I was able to get some work with the Big East Network back in those days. And, once you're on in the Northeast, it's very easy for the folks in Bristol, Connecticut to spot you. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough at that time, too, that a lot of women's sports were starting to be broadcast on regional networks and on national television. And I hit it perfect, being really the only female play-by-play announcer in those days that, hey, we need a woman to do this, call Beth. And I was like, all right, sure. Can you do tennis? No, I can't do tennis, but I will tell you, yes, of course I can do tennis. And I would learn how to call tennis. I called dog shows back in the days. If you can call a dog dropping a dookie on national television, then you can pretty much call anything, I'll tell you that. And so it was, again, never say no for no particular reason, and get the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of repetition in what you want to do, and you're on your way.
Well, Syracuse is also obviously very proud of you. They awarded you the Marty Clickman Award in 2015, won by Bob Costas, Marv Albert, Sean McDonough. So you are in very elite company and have traveled in elite company ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a real special night, a real special honor, of course, for my dad as well, who grew up sneaking into the old Archibald Stadium in Syracuse to watch Jim Brown play not only football, but lacrosse. Jim Brown is probably the best football and lacrosse player in U.S. history. So, just being able to be back in his hometown and sort of the joy on my parents' face to, sort of see one of their kids be able to pursue, a lifelong dream and figure out a way to get there, through or over or around or under obstacles that are tossed in front of you was that was one of the highlights to be recognized with some of the legends. And also, one of those moments as we all get a little bit older, Gary, you realize that you're going to be leaving something behind too when you go. And so it's important really to not only maintain, but continue to raise the standard and raise the bar of the Costases and Tiricos and hopefully for some younger women that are coming up through the ranks. The Baltimore Orioles just had a woman calling play-by-play on their game the other night, which was a big breakthrough for women in sportscasting.
I've always been impressed with the way you exude confidence. You leave Syracuse, you leave that market, and you're headed to ESPN. Did you have the same kind of confidence? Or were you a little nervous? Were you a little unsure about the decision? Or did you just know you could go and get it done?
You know what? It's interesting. So you have the people that work at ESPN, and then you have people like me, we call it remote productions, who work everywhere else but Bristol. And so I was hardly ever there. Even today, I may be there once or twice a year just to, maintain contact and say hello to people or go to a meeting or such. But it was growing up knowing that's where I wanted to be. It was very intimidating in terms of a physical presence of Bristol in this magical place. It was like a sportscaster's Disneyland. And so anytime I had to go there, it was very nerve-wracking. But anytime I was working and calling a game and with my team, I still refer to our crew as our team, just like as if I was playing. And I try and maintain that sort of point guard or quarterback mentality. And that confidence on the court, even though it wasn't always there for me socially, even when I first got to Lafayette, That was somewhat of a learned behavior. I always had the confidence on the court. And so that definitely carried into my career. I've always had the confidence behind the microphone. Once I'm sitting down to call a game and you can just sort of let everything else go and just do your work, that has been something I've been very proud of.
You started out primarily in women's sports, and I know
Mhm.
maybe one of your big moments had to be the 2011 World Cup,
Yeah.
the Women's World Cup. But in the back of your mind, did you have a sense that what I really want to do is I want to get in the area where these men are and start calling sports just as a sports broadcaster, not as a man, not as a
Yeah.
woman?
Well, beside the fact, Gary, that's where all the cash is on the men's side. No, it's an interesting balance that you have to try and walk as a female broadcaster, because your entree into the business is quite often calling women's sports. But if you want to move up in terms of, like all of us, we want to call big games. We want to call the best games out there.
Mm-hmm.
In most instances, those are on the men's side. You have to catch the eye of your bosses and make sure they know, hey, I'm out here and I'm doing a lot of good work. You may not have watched me on the women's bowling national championships, but give me a chance to call a men's hoops game. I'll show you what I can do. And then once that's established, I absolutely love calling the women's volleyball championships and the
Mm-hmm.
women's soccer and the women's basketball. And perhaps the thing that really has grown the most over the course of the last 25 years is the Women's College World Series and the way that softball has blown up. And I started out there with maybe 5 of us would show up in Oklahoma City. And, you know, the last year before the pandemic, we've got a compound with over 200 people and 6 production trucks, and it's a huge deal. So on the one hand, you want to show women's athletics that they're just as important, that they love the game and are as passionate about the game as much as anything, and they deserve a big voice to their big moments. You also, as a kid growing up, watching the Super Bowl, watching the Yankees, watching games at Notre Dame Stadium, those are all things still that I want to check off my checklist. And to be able to call the Olympics or the World Cup, to be able to, work on the men's basketball tournament, were all huge goals of mine as a kid. And you certainly still want to pursue those, as an adult.
Well, you certainly reached the highest of heights in football, doing Monday Night Football, and then moving on to the NFL on CBS.
Yeah.
Did you consider that the pinnacle of your career, or is it just another game, just another job, just let's go out and do the best I can?
Obviously, it's pretty big to get that call, and then after that settles in and it's time to go to work, the approach really is no different than every game you do. You want to approach just like you do every practice and every drill you run with the exact same enthusiasm and energy. And so, after the initial phone call comes in March for Monday Night Football, and then the NFL on CBS right around the same time, I was just diving into day by day and building game boards and doing research and having the pleasure of working with Rex Ryan. We actually got together to do the Florida State spring football game because Rex was the rookie of the group. I was actually the veteran. And then we got together again over the summer they actually would set up practice booths for us. So ESPN does 2 NFL preseason games to get their A crew ready. And they set up separate booths for Rex and I down, I believe we're in Jacksonville and in Cleveland. We don't get the best games in the preseason. And so they set us up in a separate booth, and we could practice and rehearse with our producer and our director and sort of get Rex's feet wet and get him feeling more comfortable with everything that was going on and helping us develop a rapport so that when the big day come, we felt at least comfortable with the people around us. And then it's a matter of just tackling the moment.
Did you ever have a nightmare experience?
Ironically enough, when Sergio Dip came on and did his report for that Monday night game, Sergio was a great guy, who didn't have a lot of experience in that situation. And the report did not go the way he wanted. And, you know, it was a situation where you have a teammate that you want to succeed and you want to see everybody do well. And then you immediately have to refocus on the game at hand and the task at hand, and doing your job and working with Rex to get everything on track. And fortunately for all of us, we ended up having a great game with a fantastic finish. You know, we want 5 things as sportscasters. We want a taste of the town. So when we come to town, we'd like an adult beverage or a burger at the joint you're famous for. We want, you know, a fun interaction with fans where we can sort of get a feel for what the fan base is about. We want a competitive game. You know, we're not always going to get the best game of the weekend, but if we have a competitive game, that's great. We want a fantastic finish, and then we want a swift and safe journey home to our families. And so we got all of that for Monday Night Football, and we got all of that when I was lucky enough to do the NFL on CBS as well.
Ironically, I even got to call a Lafayette game, right?
Yes. I had the Lafayette. I think it was the 2000 game where they beat Navy, in Kirby to go on to the NCAA tournament, and that was one of my big thrills, to be able to call a game back at Lafayette, to be able to call a game back at Syracuse where I grew up, were really special moments.
We're almost about ready to open things up for a Q&A from some of the people who are watching. So just a reminder to those people, if you'd like to ask a question, just use the raise your hand screen that's on there. My final question is one I get asked all the time. Do you have a favorite sport?
And I try and be as politically correct as I can with that answer, Gary. So football is probably the biggest event to prepare for. Is once a week, and there's so much that goes into it, from Sunday right up to Saturday, or if the NFL from Sunday to Sunday. Basketball is home for me. That's where I grew up in my household, so that's my comfort zone. And then the other thing I work on is the softball and the Women's College World Series, which is probably the biggest moment and biggest event that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of. So those are the ones.
My answer always is it's the one I'm doing at the moment.
The one that's next. That's exactly right.
You got it correct. All right, we have our first question, Beth. It's from Josh Azer, who helps us put all this together on the Lafayette campus. Who were you most excited to interview or meet during your career?
So the thing is, you're lucky enough to work with a lot of people that are maybe celebrities or famous, and you're around a lot of athletes that are celebrities and famous, and you put your professional face on, and you go to work and you do your job, and it's kind of neat to be able to interact and sort of get behind the scenes information from all those folks. But I would have to say, Josh, the only one that caught my breath when I shook his hand was Michael Jordan, and I was able to do an NBA on ESPN radio broadcast, a couple of them with Michael Jordan back in the Bulls' heyday. And the one time I think where the realization hit me that I'm standing in front of the most famous person on the planet right now, and that was the one that was one of those goosebump kind of moments.
Did you ever have an interview that scared you? I once interviewed Woody Hayes, and he said to me, "Kid, if you ask me anything I don't like, I'm going to walk off." Did you ever have anybody who
never had sort of an uncomfortable experience? The only one I will say that was somewhat intimidating was an interview again with NBA radio for ESPN, Shaquille O'Neal, who literally walks into the room and sits down. It's like a big folding chair, and even when he sits down in front of you, he's still about 4 feet taller than you. And then the same thing at the end of the interview, this giant of a man just unfolds in front of you and walks out of the room. That was one of the ones where you realize, okay, these are big guys out there, and they are throwing their weight around, and I'm glad I'm over on the sideline. Yes.
Hey, a good friend of yours has a question. Tom Ojakian is with us, and Tom, you can ask the question yourself.
Thank you, Beth. I've loved these stories. I want to talk to you so much more after this for some follow-up, but I'm going to guess that you're going to have to call some games from home this year rather than on site because of COVID. So tell us what it's going to be like calling play-by-play from your home.
It's going to be, OJ, very, very strange. I haven't had the chance to do it yet, but I've been watching a lot of my friends, and so basically they send us a setup where we have a couple of monitors in front of us. We have a link, so we actually have like our IFB or our headset on, so we can hear. So if I'm calling the game with you and you're elsewhere, I'm seeing you on the screen, there's probably a bit of a delay. And I'm also listening in my other ear to our producer who's in a third place in his house. And I think part of the setup too, OJ, is your other monitor is every camera angle in the gym. So we can call for certain things, or you can see certain things going on that aren't going out to the viewer at home. And so the big thing is, we like to say we're calling it off the monitor. And we should only be describing or talking about things that are on the monitor that you at home can see. But we also have the ability to see the rest of the field, and we know something's developing off camera, or we know the coach is going ballistic on the sideline, and we have a little button in front of us called the talkback, where we can talk to our producer and it doesn't go out on the air. Say, hey, get me a shot of Coach Garrett. He's going crazy over there on the sideline. He didn't like that last call. And he's terrifying John Leone, who's running in the other direction over there on the sideline. And we can call that up on our monitor. And when you're doing that from home, that's kind of one of the things that we miss out on, is we don't get a chance to see that other action happening off camera that we can help our producer and director put on screen for the folks at home.
Coach Garrett yelling at John Leone is something I see all the time, so that's nothing unusual.
I will say that the greatest assist that OJ ever had for me is, OJ was working at the Big East Conference, and I was one of the sidelines for the men's Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden, which is perhaps the event that I miss the most in all of college athletics. But so we're working like crazy, and OJ's running around, and OJ's one of those guys, he knows everybody in the gym, and he finds out ahead of time. The night session includes Syracuse and Georgetown. And President Clinton, who at the time was out of office, but Hillary was running for Senate, I think, in New York. So he was still somebody that we, might want to consider talking about. He's a big basketball fan. And obviously Syracuse is in the state of New York, and he graduated from Georgetown. So there's a couple of Lafayette, me and OJ commiserating at midcourt before the session starts. How can we get this interview? It'd be a coup at the time to get this interview with the former president. And so OJ worked some magic, and it just so happened that Bill Clinton's best friend is a guy from Syracuse who my dad coached against when he was in high school. Wow. And that is how OJ and I sort of wove our magic to get an interview with Bill Clinton, promising that we would only ask him about Syracuse basketball and Georgetown basketball. They both end up winning that night, so they're going to play the next day. And it was fabulous to just, this negotiation. I'd send OJ, go back over and talk to him, OJ. See if he'll do it. And he kept saying, no, not now, not yet. Maybe later. And OJ got it done for us, and we got that Bill Clinton interview on during the Syracuse game later that night, and he was fabulous with all his knowledge of college hoops.
Pretty much a guarantee if you hang around OJ, you're going to have stories.
Yeah, you're going to run into some pretty cool people, yes.
Kelly Barrett is with us. She has a question for you on camera. Here's Kelly.
All right.
Thanks. Gary, great interview. Appreciate that. And Beth, obviously, this has just been phenomenal hearing your entire career, both professionally and, at Lafayette. So thank you for being here. Being a huge sports fan myself, I ran track and I graduated in '99. What is your take on how professional football, the NFL, is going to go this season, knowing what you've seen from the other leagues and what we're seeing unfold? The NFL is obviously a bigger, by number of athletes and sort of fandom and things along those lines. What's your take?
I think, Kelly, they find themselves sort of in between the NBA, and the whole bubble thing, and MLB, which is just, we're going to be out there, we're going to stay at home and play every night. And so I think the NFL, there will be challenges being outside the bubble. these are young guys, and you know, they're living the single life, or they're married with young kids, and they've got, you know, school, and they've got a lot of things that where you're interacting with a lot of people. And so I think that is going to be the challenge, to be as responsible as possible in terms of, you know, distancing and wearing their masks, and trying to be very aware of their surroundings. And I'm hopeful. I am hopeful they can get it done, because you know, the NFL, if there's a way, they're going to figure it out. I think they have the capability to really limit their travel, Kelly. So usually an NFL team would go on the road for a Sunday game. They'd leave town on a Friday, and or they'd be in town first thing on Saturday. And I think that's going to change to, we're going to get all our work done before we get to town, maybe show up on a Saturday night. Or I wouldn't be surprised, you know, on the East Coast, where a lot of these teams are close to one another, if they're not going to try and go in day of and get out day of, to avoid another hotel stay and some of the problems that you can run into with other people that are guests at the hotel. So I am hopeful. And, you know, there is so much riding on it. If we can, you know, keep these guys healthy and keep the people around them healthy, I think there's a good shot at it. These next couple of weeks are going to be critical. You know, I from what I understand, they're trying to just like they'd like to do in schools, is sort of group guys together by position, group people together by friends that you know they're going to be hanging out, so that you can do a little bit of contact tracing. If one person does get it, you can at least separate him or that smaller group, as opposed to having the entire group affected. Obviously, the challenge for football is you have a limited roster and a limited number of backups to begin with, and it is a very physical place to be. And so if you start losing a lot of players on one particular team due to COVID, that's going to be a real challenge in terms of competitive balance and fairness.
Beth, speaking of challenges, our next two questioners are John Leone and Jim Kravosky. So good luck with these two. Here they are.
Oof, oof.
Well, I think here they are.
You know, the old timers, Gary, tend to have a problem with the mute button. I'm not sure if that's the issue, if that's kicking in.
Well, I wish I had a mute button with John sometimes. There they are.
Wow, you got the two of them. The band's back together.
It took Kravosky. You know, Beth, you and Jim and I had a chance to spend some time not too long ago back on campus when you received an honorary degree, which was terrific. So that said, what I want to take the chance to do, Beth, because I don't know if I'll have a chance to do this again, is to give a shout out to your dad. Your dad, when I was growing up, he joined a group of coaches in Central New York, and you may or may not remember them, but your dad will.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Falasco, Tom Cooney, Phil Gordon, Bobby Hayes, Jerry Wilcox. These guys were all the guys that I looked up to, and we'd have meetings and everything. And I can imagine you must have been, I don't know, you were just a little tight running around. But I just want a chance to reach out to your dad. I know he's probably watching tonight. He was one of my mentors from afar. I never had a chance to work with him personally, but I can see all of the things in you that he must have taught as a great coach growing up. And I love your dad, and I love the young woman that he raised. I'm sitting here next to him.
We didn't have computers back then. The only thing we could do to pass the time was play Pong on TV. Remember Pong on TV? Yeah. Or you had to actually had to physically play the game, or when the adults were around, you actually had to sit there and listen. And so this whole group of coaches would be around the kitchen table and, you know, draw. I can still remember as a kid on a pad of paper drawing up plays just like they used to do, and that's where a lot of that was instilled. And then, you know, when it came to recruiting, I saw the hell that you went through, John, trying to, you know, encourage 18 and 19-year-olds to come play for you. I'm like, I don't want any part of coaching. I'm not doing that. I'm gonna call the games instead. And,
that's right. Beth, I have not made a bad. Well,
yes.
Don't suggest this to Gary, but I really haven't made a bad decision since I moved to the other side of the floor. But I'm here with, you know, Jim. Your name came up one time with Jim, and he couldn't. I didn't realize the depth of your relationship with Jim, and that has very little to do with basketball. It had more to do with what you and Gary talked about earlier about your relationship with the college and the administration and your classmates off the floor. And Jim said one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I come back for the naming of the Jim Kravosky building on campus, whenever that may be, that, you know.
Hey, Beth, I just left development, so be careful. I'm not, I'm looking for your name on a building before his.
Well, as long as I'm not footing the bill for it. But I will say this.
So Beth, I suggest we put both our names on CHT.
I think Don Miller's name is already on that, Jim.
Competitor that you are, I just wanted to let you know that John and I played golf this evening. I won decisively.
That's not true.
And we're sitting here in the golf course pub listening to you, and every time whether I hear you doing a game or whatever, just one of my very favorite students of all time.
Well, thank you. I grew up in a house full of educators, and so, for any of the students that are still on the call, teachers don't always hear, and educators don't always see the finished product or hear. You teach us and let us go, and may not hear from us down the road, but you always remember the group of people, and you are two of them that made such a huge impact on my life, and just helped give me the knowledge and the confidence and the tools, equipped me with the tools to deal with whatever was to come my way in the real world, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
Yep.
Beth, we have 3 more questions. This one's from Coach Garrett, but I'll read it for you, and I think it's more of a personal question. What advice would you give a young woman entering college who aspires to be a sports broadcaster or a journalist? He has one of those young ladies on the call.
Oh, well, all
it's
right.
It's his daughter, Caroline. So
well,
advice?
Let's see what some of the stuff that I like to. Well, I've already talked about never say no for no particular reason. I also developed a love affair at Lafayette College with a guy by the name of Mark Twain. And so I am a big Mark Twain quote person. And I would also say to young women, why wouldn't you go out on a limb? That's where the fruit is. And that's my favorite Mark Twain. And sometimes that limb cracks a little bit beneath you. Sometimes you may fall off that limb, and you got to climb back up the tree and get right back out there and keep reaching for the fruit. I also encourage women to play sports. That's where a lot of us develop our confidence. It's through repetition, and it's through failure, and it's through learning from those mistakes and getting right back in there and doing it again. And once you start tasting a little success, then that starts to build, and you get a little momentum going, and your confidence grows, and you want to be in those leadership types of roles. And sports is what really is the proving ground and the place that I developed a lot of that. And it's also the place where you learn to be more comfortable in what naturally might be uncomfortable situations. I can remember growing up, sometimes I was the only girl in the gym, and my good friend growing up in Syracuse would take us to some of the gyms to play pickup down in the city, where me and one of my other buddies, we were the only white people in the gym. And you start to learn a lot more about the similarities amongst us than what any differences might be. And it's in sports, and it's on the air, where you get an opportunity to prove yourself. You get an opportunity to earn the right to be there. And if you provide a skill that everybody else around you needs, and it helps them get better, and it helps them win, then those are things that will help you as a sportscaster or whatever you choose to pursue in your life. And those are the things that I kind of keep close to me. And the last thing I would say, Caroline, is something that I learned through my experiences in the NFL. And they had a saying a few years ago, who's in your huddle? And if you think of a football team huddling up And it's those guys, it's those women in your huddle that are the most important. Those are the voices that you should be listening to. Those are the people whose respect you want to earn. There's a lot of noise out there from the 80,000 people in the crowd and the 20 million watching at home. Yeah, you'd like for them to like you, but that's not the important thing. And you've got to, black out all that noise and focus on who's in your huddle. And those are the people that you want to play with and play for and succeed with, and then have your post-game party with.
It doesn't hurt to have Beth Mowins as a role model either, if you want to follow somebody.
Oh,
Kerry Kenny, who played basketball in 2007 at Lafayette, he says, do you change your preparation techniques depending on the sport? How has your preparation process evolved over the years?
Yeah, so it's something that we as sportscasters love to steal good ideas from other sportscasters. And so a lot of times our discussion when we do get a chance to get together is, what do your game boards look like? How do you prepare? So, for example, I think I still have them here. Yeah. So this is a game board when I was preparing for Raiders preseason. And it's essentially a big flip card that we keep in front of us. And you can flip from, here's the Raiders offense. This would be the opponent's defense. And then when they exchange possession, you just flip it, Raiders, the other team's offense and the Raiders defense. And there's a lot of memorization, names and numbers. And then I'll have written down on my game board, little notes in here, stats on the players, things that the coaches have told us, things that the analyst feels are important. So, for example, Derek Carr, in his 6th year, he's had 3 different offensive coordinators and 4 different head coaches in his young career already. Here's stuff on Josh Jacobs. The orange guys are rookies. The green guys would be free agents. So there's different little things that I like to put together. I'd have information on the coaches, on the GM over here, team notes over here, all stuff that I would be putting together over the course of the week. And a lot of game boards look very similar. This particular one is an idea I got from Mike Tirico, who was a Syracuse grad that I actually was an intern for years ago. I used to have my offense down here and my defense up here, and he suggested, well, what are the names and numbers that you're looking for most often? It's your wide receivers and your running backs, and it would be on the defensive side, it would be your DBs and your edge rushers going in for a sack. So that's kind of how I would put my board together. And then I would also have little note cards. I love my index cards. So here's information on their new stadium so we can start a conversation. Derek Carr, since he has so much info, he would get his own card. And I like to prepare both teams, division notes, conference notes, national notes. So if there's a cut-in from another game, I might have information to start a conversation with my analyst. If we're late in the season and we're talking about the playoff picture, I know all the national news going on, who could clinch today, all that kind of stuff. That's all prepared over the course of the week. And then we would meet with both head coaches and both coordinators and probably a couple of players on Friday and Saturday before the game.
Beth, I noticed that all looks handwritten. They have computers now.
Yeah, yes, they do, but I am still an old schooler. I've tried desperately to learn Excel and Word, and it just ain't happening,
Isn't happening.
Gary. So, and I've also discovered over the years that this actually I do have a template, so I don't have to write the whole thing out, but writing down names and numbers helps with my memorization. So
I agree with that.
I don't know
All
if I
right,
should
our final-
quit now
final
and move
question.
on to the computer or not, but we'll see. This has been working all right.
Our final question comes from an assistant women's basketball coach at Lafayette, Katie Kolinsky, and she'll ask the question herself. Here's Katie.
Hey, Beth. Obviously,
Hey, Katie.
from Syracuse, I've been a big fan of yours for a while. You could even probably see the S behind me on my wall.
I do.
So my question to you, I worked on the men's side at Syracuse men's basketball, and, that was an uphill battle being a woman in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with people in your business or even fans that think that, you know, maybe you shouldn't be calling NFL games or they should be calling them over you, or, you know, I'm sure fans will have stuff to say about you being a woman calling games. How do you deal with, you know, the negativity that also comes with you being a woman on the men's side?
Yeah. Well, first off, Katie, I am fortunate enough not to have grown up in the age of social media. This is a much different deal and a much bigger deal for younger women who, you know, it's your day to day to be checking your social media all the time. And that wasn't the case for me growing up. So when I was, you know, making some mistakes in local TV and sort of working my way up, I didn't have that kind of harassment. I was really lucky to have a wonderful group of supportive men around me, because that's all it was in those days were men. And so even today, you know, while I do have a bit of a presence on social media, it's kind of, you know, I got some great advice from some friends in the business that, hey, you know, don't interact. First of all, as a play-by-play announcer, I'm kind of like Switzerland. I don't want to sort of get involved in that kind of tit for tat. That's more of the opinion of the analyst role, or the what we call now opinionators on the talk shows on TV. It's also something that comes from another great Mark Twain quote: never argue with a fool. Onlookers might not be able to tell the difference. My other favorite is never try and teach a pig to sing. It won't work, and it just annoys the pig. So those are the kinds of things that I like to keep in mind. And, you know, while I understand you're not going to change the minds of everyone, and there will always be hate and misogyny out there, like I was talking about earlier, I try and listen to the voices of the people that are in my huddle, and I try and seek out either the positive feedback or the folks that are actually interested in a conversation.
Beth, this has been so much fun. We thank you so much for taking the time. I understand completely why Lafayette is so proud of one of their graduates. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Of course, we have more Primetime Pards coming up in the future. Mike Weinstein will be our next guest in September. He's had an amazing career with Pepsi and beverages and led the turnaround of the Snapple brand. So he will be our next guest. My thanks to Scott Morse, Ryan Ludroff, John Sabino, Josh Azer for all of their help in putting this all together. And special thanks to Beth Mowins. For Primetime Pards, I'm Gary Laubach. Good night, everybody.